Did a former attorney general just scream at a sitting black congresswoman in a live hearing? The sound echoed violent, sharp like a gavel dropped from fury instead of formality. A thud, a shout, then silence. William Barr, flushed red, his eyes bulging behind thick glasses, leans forward over the microphone. His voice isn't just raised, it's booming, as if sheer volume might replace accountability. His hand slams the table, and for a moment the entire room forgets protocol. Chairs shift. Murmurs ripple. The oxygen seems thinner. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett sits unmoving. No flinch. No blink. Just a stillness so potent it becomes louder than his tantrum. She folds her hands, eyes steady, lips pressed in focus. She's not scared. She's not shaken. She's watching a man unravel himself in real time. And America is watching too. Cameras zoom in. Aides freeze mid-note. News alerts begin crawling seconds after the eruption. Barr explodes during oversight hearing. Tensions flare between former AG and Reppers Crockett. The moment, caught in high-definition fury, is instantly clipped, captioned, and catapulted across social media. But what the headlines miss is the heartbeat just beneath the chaos. The truth that's about to be spoken, not shouted. Because while Barr screams, Jasmine prepares. You can see it. That lawyer's calm. That activist's fire held in reserve. That unmistakable silence before a storm that doesn't destroy it reveals. He thinks this is a fight. She knows this is a mirror, and what she says next? You'll want to rewind it again and again, because it won't just clap back, it will echo. Through halls of power, through timelines and inboxes and living rooms, through every woman who's ever been talked over, every immigrant who's been dismissed, every truth-teller who's been told to stay in their lane. This isn't just a clash of politics. This is a confrontation with power itself. And just when you think it couldn't get more intense, it does. This wasn't just another hearing. This was a boiling point wrapped in formality, a collision dressed up as civics. And inside that oak-paneled room, beneath the polished wood and solemn tones, was something far more combustible than policy. Pride, history, and the fight for the soul of American justice. The House Oversight Committee convened under the usual pretense transparency, accountability, another routine inquiry into the Department of Justice's perceived weaponization. But the subtext was raw, simmering, racial undertones, gender dynamics, party vendettas, and a looming question neither side could avoid. Who gets to define truth in today's America? On one side sat William Barr, former Attorney General, once hailed as the law's gatekeeper, now more myth than man. His reputation was forged in smoky backrooms and conservative legal circles. He spoke the language of the institution, dense, slow, confident with the certainty that came from decades of unchallenged power. But beneath the surface there was something else now: fatigue, maybe even fear, because for the first time the rules were changing. And the people asking the questions didn't look like the ones who used to. Enter Jasmine Crockett, Texas-born, civil rights attorney, freshman congresswoman with the kind of voice that cuts through noise like steel through silk. Crockett doesn't do platitudes. She doesn't do veiled questions. She brings receipts, and she brings them with a tone that lets you know, this won't be polite if you came to play games. When she entered the room, something shifted. You could feel it in the side eyes, the quickened note-taking, the way Barr adjusted his posture ever so slightly. She wasn't there to perform. She was there to press. This wasn't a generational clash. It was ideological warfare. Barr, the institutional relic, came prepared to defend the DOJ he once led, as if it still answered only to men like him. He expected pointed questions, yes, but not her questions. Not with that directness. Not with that command. Crockett started slowly. She referenced past testimony. She cited legal precedent. But when Barr deflected, when he gave his classic smirk and leaned back in his chair like truth was beneath him, something clicked. She leaned in. The rhythm changed. And suddenly, Barr wasn't responding to a fellow member of Congress. He was reacting. Defensive. Short-tempered. Volume rising. This wasn't just about law anymore. This was about control. And Crockett wasn't yielding an inch. Across social feeds, journalists and commentators were already sensing the tension. "Something's happening in this room," a Politico reporter tweeted. A TikTok creator clipped Crockett's early line, "I'm not here for theater. I'm here for truth." And it started spreading like dry grass catching fire. Because everyone could feel it. This wasn't decorum. This was a reckoning. And as Barr's tone grew louder, unhinged, desperate Crockett didn't raise her voice. She narrowed it. She forced a man who once ran the Department of Justice to show who he really was when challenged by a woman who wouldn't shrink. What no one knew in that moment, not even Barr himself, was that the second he tried to silence her was the moment he lost everything. To understand why William Barr exploded that day, to truly grasp the fragility behind the fury, you have to understand who he is. Not just the resume, but the worldview, the entitlement, the long-standing belief that his interpretation of the law is the law. William Pelham Barr, twice Attorney General, first under George H.W. Bush, then decades later under Donald J. Trump. A man who calls himself a constitutionalist, but whose record reveals something closer to a loyalist, not to principle, but to power. He's been called the president's lawyer with a badge. Because when Barr walks into the room, he doesn't carry justice, he carries the shield of the executive branch like a sword. In 2019, when the Mueller report landed like a thunderclap, the country braced for impact. But Barr intercepted it. Before the public could read a single page, Barr issued his own summary. 4 pages, carefully worded, deceptively calm, designed not to inform, but to control the narrative. "No collusion," he declared, a phrase not even found in Mueller's actual report. It worked. For weeks, Americans believed the president was cleared. By the time the truth came out that Mueller had explicitly not exonerated Trump, the headlines had faded, and Barr had done his job, not as a neutral interpreter of the law, but as a political firewall. Then came Lafayette Square. Peaceful protesters, tear gas, mounted police, and William Barr personally overseeing the scene, clearing the path for a photo op of the president holding a Bible upside down. When pressed, Barr defended the decision as measured and necessary. He framed constitutional protest as chaos and state violence as order. He didn't blink. Over and over, William Barr has stood not beside the law, but above it, so long as the person wielding power matched his values. And when the person challenging that power looked like Jasmine Crockett, that's where the mask cracked, because what happens when a man who has spent his entire career insulated by privilege is questioned directly, unapologetically by someone he's never had to answer to? He doesn't know how to respond. He reacts. He rages. He shouts across microphones as if volume will erase the truth pressing in on him. That's why, in the Oversight Committee hearing, the moment Jasmine Crockett began speaking, Barr's posture shifted. His arms crossed tighter. His patience grew thinner. Her voice, measured and factual, felt to him like an attack, because it carried what he wasn't used to hearing, authority from someone outside his old boy order. Barr has always operated like rules are suggestions, and accountability is a courtesy extended only to those deemed worthy. In his world, scrutiny flows downward, never up, and certainly never toward him. But Crockett didn't come from that world. She didn't come to defer. She came to dissect, and that was Barr's real fear. He could spin cable news interviews. He could outmaneuver legacy journalists. But here was someone who wouldn't be softened by his title or bowed by his stature. A congresswoman with courtroom precision and an audience far larger than the room they sat in. The hearing wasn't about him, not officially, but in his mind, it became personal. Because this is who William Barr has always been. A man more interested in shielding the powerful than standing with the people. A man who weaponizes legal language to protect injustice. A man whose calm exterior hides a career of quiet corrosion. He came to that hearing expecting respect. What he got was accountability. And in the eyes of Jasmine Crockett, he saw something that shook him, not anger, Not rebellion, but the unrelenting calm of someone who knows she belongs in the room. That's why he screamed, because in that moment, William Barr wasn't just facing a congresswoman. He was facing the end of the world he thought would never change. Before the cameras, before the viral moments, before the trending hashtags and primetime takedowns, Jasmine Crockett was just another black girl in Dallas, scrappy, smart, and raised to speak truth even when her voice shook. She didn't grow up chasing power. She grew up surrounded by the consequences of its absence. In the shadows of broken systems and overlooked communities, Jasmine saw how justice bent for the privileged and broke for everyone else. That's what pushed her not into politics but into law, into courtrooms where clients didn't wear suits, they wore the weight of generations, into battles where the stakes weren't about polling numbers but prison time, evictions, lives. She became a civil rights attorney not for prestige, but because someone had to fight. And she fought hard. While others gave speeches, she filed motions. While others postured, she showed up. Case after case, client after client. She carved out a name not as the loudest voice, but as the one with the sharpest blade. Facts were her weapon, dignity her armor. And when she stepped into the Texas legislature, she brought that same fire with her. It didn't take long for people to notice. She wasn't performative. She was precise. Where some politicians wielded outrage for headlines, Jasmine wielded composure like a scalpel. She cut through lies not with screaming, but with receipts. Calm, deliberate, unbothered, even when chaos swirled. That didn't stop her from going viral. In fact, it made her moments hit harder. Like the time she delivered one of the most infamous clapbacks in recent memory, responding to a Republican colleague's underhanded insult with a single line that set the internet on fire. Baby. The only thing fake is that bleach-blonde, bad-built butch body you bought with blood money. It was savage. Surgical. But what made it unforgettable wasn't the insult, it was the timing. The delivery. The way she went right back to policy like nothing had happened. Like the mic drop wasn't even for show. Just another Tuesday. Because Jasmine Crockett doesn't fight for cameras. She fights because she remembers. She remembers what it's like to be underestimated. To walk into a room and feel eyes scan you for weakness. To speak and know someone's already decided you're too angry, too loud, too much. And so she stays calm. Not because she lacks heat, but because she understands power. That's what makes her dangerous to people like William Barr. He spent decades in rooms where power is inherited, not earned. Where the loudest voice wins by default. Where black women like Jasmine are supposed to be seen and not heard, or not even let in at all. But she broke that rule a long time ago. When she arrived in Congress, she didn't come to play nice. She came with a mission, to challenge power, not mimic it. And that made her a threat. Her questions in hearings aren't just sound bites. They're surgical strikes. She walks in with case law, context, and control. She doesn't shout. She doesn't perform. She dismantles. Slowly. Quietly. Completely. Which is exactly what made the confrontation with William Barr so inevitable. Because what happens when a man like him, shaped by deference, flattery, and unchecked authority, tries to intimidate a woman like her? He fails, but not in a spectacular movie-style meltdown. No. He fails slowly, subtly. He loses the room one eye roll at a time, one quiet stare from Crockett after another. He starts raising his voice because hers stays even. He grows defensive because her facts don't waver. She doesn't fight him. She exposes him, and the world watches, not just because it's dramatic, but because it's familiar. Every woman who's been interrupted, every black professional told to smile more, every immigrant child taught to work twice as hard for half the credit they see themselves in her. And in Barr, they see the wall they've been pushing against for years. So when Jasmine Crockett took her seat in that hearing room, she wasn't just a congresswoman from Texas. She was the culmination of every battle she'd fought to get there. Every courtroom win, every insult turned into fuel. Every time she was told she'd never belong, followed by the quiet, Steady decision to keep showing up anyway. This is who she is. This is why her presence rattled Barr before a word was even spoken. Because she didn't walk in looking for a fight. She walked in ready for one. And when the moment came when he finally cracked under the pressure of being questioned by someone he couldn't dismiss, she didn't even raise her voice. She just raised the standard. And what came next would make history. The hearing room was quiet, not calm but tight. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. Jasmine Crockett adjusted her mic. Papers aligned. Voice steady. Mr. Barr, you've defended the Department of Justice's handling of politically sensitive cases. But tell me, do you believe justice has ever been differently for those who look like you, compared to those who look like me? A beat, Barr blinked. Smiled. The way powerful men do when they think charm might deflect a direct hit. I think justice is impartial. I think that's the bedrock of our system, he replied, voice flat, rehearsed. Crockett didn't blink. With respect, that's a philosophical answer. I'm asking based on evidence, history, and your own record. When the DOJ cleared Lafayette Square for a photo op while people were chanting, Black Lives Matter, was that impartial justice? Barr shifted in his seat. I've answered that countless times. The crowd was unruly. We made a decision. You made a decision to fire tear gas at peaceful protesters so a president could hold a Bible upside down, she said. Crisp. He straightened. I disagree with that characterization. And yet, that's what happened, she countered. And when Mueller's report outlined 10 possible instances of obstruction, you summarized 400 pages in 4. That's not the purpose of this hearing, Barr snapped. Crockett leaned in slightly. It's exactly the purpose. This hearing is about whether justice was weaponized, and I'd argue it's been shielded. By you. A flicker passed through Barr's eyes. He reached for his water but didn't drink it. You're twisting the facts, he muttered. She tilted her head. Am I? The room watched, silent. Staffers scribbled but didn't look up. Cameras zoomed. Crockett continued, soft but firm. Mr. Barr, can you name one time during your tenure where your department protected the rights of marginalized communities against executive pressure? He hesitated. Well, I'm not going to sit here and be lectured. Barr barked, voice suddenly sharp. There it was. His volume filled the room like a slammed door. Crockett didn't move. Not an inch. Her face didn't change. But around them something did. Aide glances. Crossed arms. Viewers leaned forward behind screens across the country. Because now it wasn't just about policy. It was about posture. Man once the nation's highest law enforcer raising his voice at a black woman whose only weapon was the truth. The gavel didn't fall. The chair didn't intervene. Nobody needed to, because Crockett was still. And silence, her silence, was deafening. Then, slowly, she leaned in and said the one thing that made the internet explode. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. After William Barr's outburst ricocheted through the hearing room, Jasmine Crockett let the silence do the heavy lifting. It stretched awkward, loaded, surgical. She let the moment settle like dust after a detonation, eyes never leaving his. And then she spoke. Mr. Barr, she began, her tone quieter than before, deliberate even. You've held one of the most powerful legal offices in this country. Twice. You've shaped policy, defended presidents, and testified before this very committee more times than I can count. She paused, not to catch her breath, but to give the room a moment to catch its soul. You've sat across from men who kissed your ring, from colleagues who tiptoed around your ego, from networks eager to spin your words into absolution. Barr shifted. His mouth tightened into a practiced smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. And yet, she continued, the moment someone who looks like me, a black woman from the south side of Dallas, asks you to defend your own record, you raise your voice like you've been wronged. The tension in the room was no longer just atmospheric. It was anatomical. People felt it in their throats, their chest. Aide pens stopped scribbling. Phones vibrated silently in pockets. Crockett leaned forward, voice low, piercing. Let me be clear. I am not here to lecture you. I'm here to remind you, another pause, that the law doesn't bend for bullies. Mr. Barr, you should know that better than anyone. And just like that, the air changed. Barr blinked. The smirk collapsed into something else, something quieter, unprepared. Around the room, a wave of suppressed gasps rippled. On Twitter, clips of her words began circulating within seconds, posted by journalists who couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Now this news. Jasmine Crockett just handed William Barr the cleanest takedown in modern hearing history. Politico buzz. The law doesn't bend for bullies. That's going on T-shirts by tomorrow. Crockett didn't look at the cameras. She wasn't performing, she was prosecuting. My record is public, she said calmly. Before this chamber, I defended clients failed by a system men like you designed. I took on police departments, landlords, governors. I did it with less power, fewer connections, and more at stake than you'll ever know. Barr's lips parted slightly as if to interrupt. She raised a single finger, not aggressively, not with attitude, but with the weight of 1,000 silenced voices finally taking their turn. I'm not finished. He stopped, and for the first time in that hearing, he looked small. See, you came in here thinking this would be like every other time, that the same old script would play out deferential questions, half answers, and the cycle moves on. But something's changed. She looked up, beyond Barr, beyond the committee. There's a new generation sitting at this table now. We didn't inherit these seats. We earned them. Through fire. Through systems built to exclude us. Through voices raised only because no one listened when we whispered. Her voice sharpened, not louder, just heavier. And we're not asking for permission to be here. A murmur from the back row. One aide whispered to another. A reporter mouthed, "Oh my God!" Crockett's eyes returned to Barr. So no, Mr. Barr, I won't accept your indignation as a substitute for truth. I won't let your discomfort hijack this moment. You may have gotten used to being untouchable, she smiled finally. Not smug, but strong. But this isn't your courtroom anymore. Barr didn't respond. What could he say? Behind him, one of his aides leaned over to whisper something. He nodded faintly, eyes unfocused. Crockett sat back, done. Not drained, done. The silence that followed was no longer awkward. It was reverent. She had spoken with the restraint of someone who's had to be careful her entire life. And still, somehow, she made it sound effortless. This wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a cultural moment. Within minutes, the quote was everywhere. Instagram reels with her line over Kendrick Lamar instrumentals. TikToks remixing her finger raise into a meme template. Commentators from Joy Reid to Hassan Minhaj sharing clips with captions like, "This is how you hold power to account." And the people watching from home? They felt it in their bones. If you've ever been talked down to in a meeting, if you've ever been called angry for simply being assertive, if you've ever been expected to stay silent just to stay safe, this moment was yours. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an argument, she won something deeper. She reclaimed space for every person who's been underestimated, ignored, or erased. And all it took was one line. But it's what came next that no one, not even Barr, was ready for. By the time Jasmine Crockett leaned back in her chair, the room hadn't even exhaled yet, but the internet had already exploded. The clip traveled at the speed of outrage. 30 seconds of calm, righteous fury. 14 words that felt like vindication. The law doesn't bend for bullies, Mr. Barr. You should know that better than anyone. By hour's end, it had been reposted over 2 million times. The hashtag Crockett Clapback hit trending status on Twitter within minutes. On TikTok, creators began stitching her moment into duets. Law students reacting in awe. Grandmothers whispering, "Say it louder." Teenagers lip-syncing her line like it was a verse from a diss track. One creator, Abe Wabblegirl Politics, captioned her post, "My whole timeline is Black Joy and Jasmine Crockett, and I'm here for it." MSNBC ran a chyron within the hour. Crockett stuns committee with takedown of Barr. BuzzFeed's homepage read, "Jasmine Crockett is not here for bullies. And neither are we." Essence called it, A masterclass in composure and power. Even Teen Vogue published a headline that simply read, "That's Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to you." Instagram Reels layered her line over a gospel choir, over trap beats, over slow piano, over Maya Angelou's "Still I Rise." But it wasn't just internet culture that noticed. Capitol Hill did too. Representative Ayanna Pressley tweeted, "When black women speak, the earth shifts. Thank you, Jasmine, for us." Cori Bush wrote, "Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak truth to power, she humbled it." Even Senator Elizabeth Warren chimed in with, "Leadership looks like this." Of course, not everyone applauded. Fox News called it grandstanding. A Wall Street Journal op-ed muttered something about disrespect toward institutional figures. Several GOP members of the committee released vague condemnations, suggesting decorum had been breached, though none mentioned Barr's shouting. And William Barr? His team issued a one-paragraph statement that landed with a thud. Mr. Barr is disappointed by the tone and partisanship in today's hearing, which detracts from important issues facing the American people. It was a sterile, defensive, hollow, because what the world had just witnessed wasn't partisanship, it was clarity, it was someone refusing to bow to the tired expectations of power. And that's what made it viral. Not just because it was dramatic, but because it was familiar. Viewers saw their mothers, their daughters, their professors, their mentors. They saw themselves being talked down to, interrupted, challenged for simply holding their ground. Jasmine Crockett gave them a victory they could feel in their chests, and it kept growing. Late-night hosts referenced it. Podcast panels broke it down like a Marvel scene. On Reddit, someone started a thread titled, "Why Jasmine Crockett Just Redefined Political Power." The top comment had 10,000 upvotes. This wasn't a clapback. This was history. T-shirts appeared overnight. "The law doesn't bend for bullies" across the chest. Bold serif font campaign donations surged for Crockett's re-election within 48 hours. Not from PACs. From people $5, $10, $20 at a time. Because when someone speaks like that, not to perform, but to defend people, remember. And Barr? He disappeared from the conversation just as fast. Not because he faded, but because he had been outclassed. His legacy, already stained by Mueller and Lafayette Square, now had a new chapter. Not one he wrote, but one that was written about him. A moment where power cracked, and truth walked in, took its seat, and spoke. This wasn't a political moment. It was a generational flashpoint. The kind that turns a congresswoman into a movement. In the days that followed, Jasmine Crockett was asked over and over again, "Did you plan it? Was it a strategy? Did you know that moment would go viral?" She always smiled small, knowing, and answered the same way. "I just spoke the truth. That's the job." But the moment wasn't just about a quote. It wasn't even about William Barr. It was about what leadership looks like when it isn't loud for the sake of noise, when it stands still while power trembles, when it speaks softly and still commands the room. Because Crockett didn't win the day with fury. She won it with focus. She didn't humiliate Barr. She exposed the imbalance he had counted on, the silence he had assumed, the deference he believed he was owed. And when she shattered it with a calm voice and a single line, she reminded millions of something they'd been aching to hear. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need permission to take your seat. You don't need to become the bully to defeat one. In the interviews that followed, Crockett spoke not about winning a debate, but about responsibility. She talked about her mother, how she worked 2 jobs and still made time to volunteer. She talked about the legal clients she defended in Texas, people who never had a voice in rooms like this. And she talked about little black girls who'd never seen someone like her own that space without apology. "I don't carry this voice for myself," she said. "I carry it for the folks who never got the mic." She wasn't asking to be praised. She was asking people to reflect. What kind of leadership do we want? The kind that shouts over others, or the kind that listens, pauses, and then tells the truth with both feet planted? What kind of country do we become if we reward cruelty over courage? This wasn't about left or right. It was about right versus wrong. It was about whether we still believe that justice belongs to the people or just the powerful. And in a single afternoon, Jasmine Crockett showed us her answer. She showed us that leadership doesn't flinch when shouted at. It doesn't fold under pressure. It doesn't run from power. It faces it with calm, with clarity, and with a voice that tells the truth, even when the whole room expects silence. She said it best. When you speak with truth, you don't need to shout. When you carry justice, you don't need to fear giants. That moment wasn't just about politics, it was a mirror, and it's still reflecting. Barr screamed. Crockett didn't flinch. And America watched truth win. What you saw wasn't just a takedown, it was a declaration. That power doesn't belong to the loudest voice. That leadership doesn't belong to the most protected man in the room. That dignity can be sharper than rage, and justice can come dressed in silence and certainty. Jasmine Crockett didn't just hold her ground. She redrew the map. And in doing so, she reminded us that the fight for truth doesn't need permission. It just needs people willing to speak it. If you felt something watching that moment, if you saw yourself, your mother, your sister, your community, if you've ever been underestimated, interrupted, or told to stay in your place, then you already know what to do. Subscribe if you believe voices like hers need more volume. Share if you believe calm. Courage should go viral louder than cruelty. Comment if you've ever been in a room where you had to hold your own with nothing but facts and fire. Because this platform is for you, not just to witness these moments, but to build from them. The world isn't changed by the people who scream. It's changed by the ones who speak with purpose and never back down. So tell your story. Speak your truth. Stand your ground, because next time it could be your voice that changes everything.